I call this meeting to order of the West Hollywood Rent Stabilization Commission. Can you please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? We'll move on to item 3, our roll call. Secretary Barrino, may we have the roll call?
Commissioner Kerpes,
Here.
Commissioner Bergstein,
Here.
Commissioner O'Keefe, Commissioner Maggio,
Present.
Commissioner Topchian,
Here.
Chair Charity.
Here. Thanks very much. We'll move on from item 3 to item 4, approval of tonight's agenda. Commissioners, having reviewed tonight's agenda, do you have a motion to approve or any amendments?
Motion to approve? Actually, could I motion to amend that? Can we postpone the selection of vice chair at least till next meeting?
No, do we want to do that?
Commissioner comments on that?
I think we could.
O'Keefe isn't here. John Howman,
We have a
while he's
second
named an appointee, hasn't been sworn in, and I think they both ought to have a say in that, and our chair is here. I don't see any harm in pushing it off until our next meeting.
Staff, any input? I don't see any harm in pushing it off if staff's okay with it. Okay, so we will amend tonight's meeting to take out the selection of vice chair and just have the only new business be owner occupancy evictions discussion. Do we have a motion to approve as amended?
With that amendment?
Make a motion to
with-
approve as amended the
That's okay.
agenda.
Let him do it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Did you do that? Did we do that in unison? I'm sorry.
Do we have a second? I'll second that motion. Can we have a vote on that motion? Well, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. It passes. So tonight's agenda is approved as amended. We'll move on to from item 4 to item 5, approval of the minutes of our previous meeting. Having reviewed those minutes, do you have any amendments or a motion to approve?
Move to approve them as submitted.
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Topchian. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. Moving on from item 5 to item 6, public comment. Do we have any public comment this evening? No? Thank you, Secretary. Moving on from item 6 to item 7, our Director's Manager's Report. We'll have that from Mr. Noonan.
Good evening. I would like to take a moment to review the look ahead. We do have a next meeting on February 14th. There are no appeals scheduled that evening. We do not have an item scheduled for that evening either. So, I will not be attending the meeting as it is February 14th, Valentine's Day. Our meeting afterwards is February 28th and then March 14th, March 28th. All three of these meetings already have 2 appeals on them. We can look at scheduling an item for the 14th with having an acting manager here for you. And I'm open to hearing your thoughts on that, or your thoughts if, in fact, there won't be a quorum that evening given well, it's not a holiday, but it's certainly a nice day to have off in the evening. That concludes the look ahead. I do want to make mention that Councilmember Howman has made his appointment, and so we will be looking at having that person come to the next meeting. So it will be good, in fact, if we know if the February 14th meeting is happening or not, because that we will be scheduling his swearing in. The gentleman's name is Kellen Martz. Maybe if you know Kellen, he will be joining us either at the next meeting. That concludes my comments.
Thanks very much. Commissioners, as we don't have anything on the agenda for the 14th, we would possibly move that selection of the vice chair to the 28th. I do wonder if we'll have a quorum for that meeting. What are your thoughts?
I agree. So we should just move it to February 28th meeting.
The public hearings are in place, right? We can't move those around. Okay.
Thank you. So I'm hearing from commissioners on this side that they won't be present for that meeting, so we would not have quorum. Are you in agreement, or?
I think my partner would appreciate the fact if I was not here on Valentine's Day.
Thanks very much. So I will I'll let staff know that then this commission won't have a quorum for the February 14th meeting, so we'll have our next regularly scheduled meeting on February 28th. Does anybody else have any questions for staff before we move on? Very good. We'll move on from item 7 to item 8, commission comments. Commissioners?
Did we, do we have public safety liaison here tonight. I just wanted to welcome you and thank you for being here.
Thank you. Commissioners, any further comments before we move on? So we will move on from item 8 to item 9, appeals, which we have none this evening. So we'll move on from item 9 to item 10, our new business owner occupancy evictions discussion. I believe we'll have an introduction from our Director Manager, Peter Noonan, and then further comment from our Commissioner.
Hi, thank you again. And in fact, I'm just going to introduce Anwar Zrekat, one of the city's information coordinators, and I will turn it over to him for a little summary of the topic this evening.
Good evening, Commissioners. As you know, one of the no-fault evictions that we have with the city is owner occupancy, which means that if there's an individual who buys a property or owns a property and wants to evict a tenant so that either he, she, or an immediate family member can move in, they can do that with the proper notice and proper payment of relocation fees. Important point, it cannot be an LLC that owns the property. It has to be an individual. Mary Smith owns it. It can't be Smith LLC, for example. And once that's done, the next thing that they can do is that they can evict the most recent tenant to have moved into the size unit that they want. Now, this is not size meaning square footage. It means, is it a 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, etc. So they can't just pick any unit they want and say, okay, I want to evict this tenant. It has to be the most recent into, let's say they want a 1-bedroom apartment. The only exception to that is if the landlord needs, let's say he's moving his mother there, and his mother is an elderly lady who cannot go upstairs, up and downstairs, and he wants the downstairs 1-bedroom. But that is not the most recent tenant. With a doctor's letter, more than likely, we would approve for his mother to move into that. Okay? As I said, there are relocation fees that must be paid. Also, by the way, that's all in our ordinance at 1752.010, number 12. It discusses all that. Also, there's a period that the tenant must, but they have 6 months to move into it, and then they must live there at least a year. Now, if they decide, either after a year or after 2 years or what have you, to move out and they want to re-rent it, they can, but the rent goes back to what the previous tenant had moved out of, plus any annual general adjustments that I've put an information of a relocation on your desks, actually Celeste did, and also the packet for the relocation for owner occupancy, that whole packet of what a landlord must go through. So,
Do we, I'm sorry, is Maddie recognized?
Questions?
Yes, sure, please.
it's just in general right now, but I can give you an idea of it, if I may use round numbers.
Right.
It starts out with about 7,000 for a single, 10,000 for a 1-bedroom, 14,000 for a 2-bedroom, and then for low income, it's around 23,000, close to 24,000.
And I think we would want to mention that is for seniors, 62. Still, let's see, we're still giving them 1-year notice and.
No, sir. It's a 60-day notice for owner occupancy. It's either whether they're senior or not. For owner occupancy, it's only a 60-day notice. And there's no extending that.
Now, do we do?
That first of all, when the landlord takes over, has to show that he's moving in, and usually by way of sending us copies of electric bills, other utility bills other than water, and that's one way of confirming. Then every year they have to validate that they're still there.
Okay. $1,600 and below?
It's actually a little more than that right now. It's about 54,000, sir.
And a moderate starts at 72,000?
No, wait. No. Anything under 54,000, again, I'm rounding right now, is low income. Anything between 54,000 and roughly 80,000 is moderate income.
So we have brought it up.
It's only for low income. Now, mostly seniors are low income, so it applies to them.
But that would be from 54,000 below, right?
That's
Lower.
correct, sir.
Thank you very much. Those are my questions.
Commissioner Topsy?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Anwar. A couple of questions. Well, include this is
That's what the
strictly-
ordinance says, yes, sir.
Okay. A couple of other things. Do we have a stats how many for last, I don't know, maybe 5 years, how many owner occupancy evictions we had in the city, or any statistics?
I could get them for you, but no, I do not have them with me.
Because I want to know how often.
I can tell you that probably in the last couple of years, there hasn't been more than a dozen at most.
Okay. And what is the procedure, sort of an enforcement of a bad faith eviction, and how we establish a bad faith eviction if let's say the property owner didn't move in, or relative? Is there any process to verify that? And if yes, so what
Not city attorney, but our staff attorney, Jonathan Hollub, is following on one case right now, which is on, I'm sorry, oh my God, I lost this. Anyway, on Larrabee. And 2 ladies were evicted for the owner to move in, and we've been keeping an eye out, and we've seen that no one has moved in. What we've also seen is pursuing it. Now, nothing has happened so far. I know he's pursuing it. I have another one where the landlord and the tenant have been at odds with each other, and they did an owner occupancy, and we've been getting information. One is living there. His own attorney, he went and they've been doing research, and again, all that packet has now gone to Jonathan Hollub, and they're researching it because they feel that they have enough evidence to show that the son is not living in there and that they're renting it. But that's just to give you an idea to answer your question. I don't have anything definitive, but that's what's going on right now.
But one or two, just very quickly. I recently read the Los Angeles Rent Stabilization Ordinance, and so that and what I revealed is that the landlord the tenant protections for owner occupancy evictions also include not just the terminally ill, other kind of protections factors, such as if the tenant, let me just state it. A landlord cannot evict if a comparable unit is vacant, and tenants who are terminally ill, certified by the physician, are protected from the evictions. So we don't have that 10 years and 62 years of age or disabled protection category.
No, sir.
In our
No, the only category we have for exception,
The terminally
as you
ill.
stated, is the terminally ill. That's correct.
Okay. Do we know other cities if they have similar? We didn't do research.
I frankly haven't checked. I worry about our own right now.
Right. No, I was just wanted the same way to the tenants in the city and
Yeah.
other jurisdictions. But maybe the commission can just discuss it later. Well, I think at this point, that's all. Thank you.
Commissioner Kerpes or Bergstein?
Questions? The 60 days notice requirement?
Yes, sir.
Is that set by the city, or is that established by state law? My real question is, can we make that 60-day, 90-day, 180-day, you know,
Right,
1
I believe
year.
so, yeah. There's nothing in state law that dictates that at all.
And then my other question about, owners cannot take over more than one unit, right?
Yes, they can, but it's once every 6 years.
Okay, so
So
there'd
in other
be-
words, if you own a building and you have a brother you want to put in, you can, but you cannot do another owner occupancy for 6 years.
So, see, I would read that as meaning you can do it once, but if you move out, you have to wait 6 years to do it again.
No, what it is that if I'm your brother and you put me in, but you have a sister, you have to wait 6 years before you can evict someone else to put that other person in.
Okay. What if I take over a unit and I move out in 2 years? Year 3, can I put my grandmother in?
No, I mean, well, wait. If you have evicted someone, if I'm understanding your question correctly, and you were in there, and then you move on, you want to put your mother, fine. It's still, because it's under you, it's fine. There's no change in anything there.
So regardless of how many units I have, I can only do one eviction every 6 years.
That's correct, sir.
So I could eventually take over the whole building if I wanted, but it would have to be
Right.
staggered in 6-year.
That's right.
Okay.
The only other exception, so that we make sure that we're correct. Again, let's say that it's a duplex, 2 units, and you have a partner, and each of you has 50%, whatever that, and that's the only time you can do 2 at the same time.
Okay.
Okay, so that you both can get one. You'd be new owners, you want to take over. That's the only time. So there is an exception in that you can do 2 at once, but it has to be you and a partner, and both of you. And what I mean by partner, it could be any kind of partner.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
And so, is it also exclusive to just a duplex, or is it any building?
Any building that has 2 units only.
Co-partners
Right.
of the owners?
Uh-huh.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. And my last question, so just to clarify, so when you were giving the 2 examples just now about the cases being, that you were working on and then turned over to the staff attorney, did you say the first example you gave, did you say that you turned over the stuff but the city was not pursuing?
No. I said Jonathan is
Oh,
pursuing
okay,
both of them.
okay, I
Yes,
just
sir.
wanted to clarify that.
No,
I didn't-
definitely.
That makes more sense.
Yeah, okay.
And then my other question kind of related to that is, do you have a rough estimate of the number of prosecutions the city has complaints the city has filed against a property owner
I
for
don't
this
know about the
purpose?
number of actual cases that have gone, but I know of a couple of cases where we've reversed the owner occupancy eviction, and they've had to put a tenant back in.
Okay. And I think, sorry, my last final question is that, so that, are you aware of a reason why we don't include the 10-year in disabled, the criteria that Los Angeles used? Do you know,
Not
just
really.
historically, I know
mean,
you've been with the
this
city
is
for a
what it
while.
was. This is what's been in the ordinance for years that I know of. I know I've been doing this for roughly 12 years, so that's what it is. I've never heard of anyone wanting to change that
Thank you.
or amend it in any way.
Thanks.
Commissioner Bergstein?
So, thank you for coming out tonight. Sorry to drag you in after hours, and this was a topic that I asked to have brought up.
I understand, sir.
It's rather personal to me. I own a property in West Hollywood that is 2 houses on 1 lot, and when I purchased the property, while I tried to enter into a voluntary agreement with the tenants in the front house, they were not amenable. Actually, the owner sold this property because the tenants were unpleasant tenants, and I'll just leave it at that. And it was to the point where when I called rent stabilization, they said, you need to do an owner occupancy eviction, which is what I did. They actually, it was stopped in its tracks because one of the tenants claimed to be terminally ill. And the city said, you have an issue that you're not going to be occupied. They ended up sort of blackmailing me for some additional money, additional time, which I would have been amenable to in the beginning, and they did move out. So I'm trying to distill my issue is that if someone else's out a building, and a good example of that is that really beautiful building at Fountain and Laurel, where rather than doing the repairs, the owner Ellised out the entire building.
You mean Laurel and Sweetser? I mean Sweetser.
Sweetser and Fountain, thank you.
Correct.
Has allegedly left the building vacant for, it's been over 5 years now.
That's correct.
So in the case of an Ellis, if the owner has not rented it out during that 5-year period, which means they've got no financial incentives, they've borne all the expenses, and I understand that, but at the end of that 5-year period, they can then turn around and place these units back on the market, whatever they would like to charge. They don't have to offer it back to prior tenants. It just goes back under market rent.
Yes and no to what you just said. Yes, they can put it back at market, but the first 5 years, the first 10 years, they do have to offer it back to the old tenant. So if I was a tenant paying $1,000 when I was evicted, but here it is 5 years and 1 day, and now they're charging $5,000, they can, but they still have to offer it to me first.
But at the whatever rent they would like to set.
Right, exactly.
So on the converse side, with an owner occupancy eviction, as in my case, and I've spent well over $200,000 on my property, it was not in good shape. In perpetuity, if I decide to move out and want to keep that property as a rental, if the prior tenant has maintained their address and a desire to move back in with the city, it must be offered back to them at the rent it was back in 2000, plus any annual adjustments. And if they do not wish to move in, whoever the first tenant back in would again be that year 2000 rent plus annual adjustments.
That's
so
correct,
while I
sir.
understand that as an owner-occupant, I have had that benefit of living in my own home for now it's 18 years, but I'm asking my fellow commissioners if we would consider discussing perhaps amending this or recommending to council they amend the ordinance where there should be a period of time where those rules apply, but at a certain point in time, not in perpetuity, that the landlord would have the ability to then offer it at market rate either to the prior tenant or to whoever the first tenant in line would be. And I'm just grabbing a number. If it's 5 years for Ellising out a building, perhaps a 10-year marker would be at the end of 10 years, you can place that unit back on the market at current market rent.
Well, I think it's 10 years. Did I hear it wrong? Was it 10 years for the Ellis?
No, sir. It's two things about Ellis, if I may. The first 5 years, it must be offered back at the current rent plus any general adjustments.
Got it.
After 5 years, they can offer it at any amount they want. What is for 10 years is that they must still offer to the initial tenants for the first 10 years.
That's what I thought, yeah.
So I do know of some property owners that have, they've shammed their way around it. They have offered it to a friend to rent at the old rent plus the adjustments, and then after 6 months to a year, magically that tenant disappears, excuse me, and then it goes back onto market rent. And I'd like to see if my fellow commissioners would be amenable to discussion to kind of bring that out in the open, much as the fact that the city now has a framework for voluntary buyouts, kind of bringing it out of the gray area and bringing it out in the public as to what might be acceptable, that perhaps we could find a framework for owner occupancy evicted units at some point in time re-entering the market without penalizing the property owner in perpetuity. So that was my purpose bringing this up. Thank you.
Sure. Is that it?
Commissioner Burstein, can you
For
flesh
now.
Can you flesh that out for me? I just didn't follow you when you said there was a situation where the person could rent it to a friend or something for 6 months and move on. What was that scenario again?
It's not legal, but it would be like a sham around there, where if the tenant who was owner occupied out had not maintained a request with the city to saying, if this goes back on the market, I'd like to re-rent my unit, then it goes to whoever's the first tenant back in that unit, gets it at that original rent plus the annual adjustment. So the landlord does like a sham rental to a friend or someone, and then after 6 months to a year, that person moves out, it goes to full market. It is not legal, but it's kind of a...
And a runaround. A runaround the...
Not a legal one, but yes.
Right, got it.
Yep.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Chair, the recent rent stabilization news speaks about landlords' agreement for buyouts, and it says landlords must file a buyout agreement disclosure with the City of West Hollywood. The landlord must file with rent stabilization a copy of executed buyout agreement, along with proof of service to the tenants of disclosure notice, no less than 31 days after, within 60 days of the agreement being signed by all the parties. It also goes on to say that a tenant shall have the right to rescind a buyout agreement for 30 days after it is signed by both the landlord and the tenant.
Thank you. I'm fine to talk about it if you want to talk about it. I think are we good for staff to, do you have any more questions for the staff?
Well, again, this is a tough question. If I'm looking at the other jurisdictions also, I see actually those jurisdictions have more strength in the owner occupancy evictions procedure. So I don't see why we have to make that ordinance actually weaker than in other jurisdictions they have. For example, as I said, I'm reading now the Los Angeles rent control ordinance, and they have even more protections than the ones that I mentioned here. For example, the move-in date for the owner will be 3 months, and we have 6 months here. And the owner is required to reside in the unit for at least 2 years, and we have here 1 year. So I think our ordinance is, so far it works, but if we're going to suggest anything to make any change that would be kind of in the favor of the landlord, or the landlord would benefit from reducing the number of years as you suggested for that scenario. So then we'll have to put the strength for some other things and give more protections to the tenants, so the tenants cannot be evicted if they are 62 years old or disabled, or they occupy for 10 years or more. So I don't know. So it's up to what other commissioners have to say.
Can I make a motion that we put on a future agenda within the next 4 meetings, a discussion on relocation for the portion of the rent stabilization ordinance dealing with relocation, or not, I'm sorry, not relocation, owner occupancy, focusing on the 3 issues. One, time, noticing, 60-day versus whatever. The issue of what Rob brought up about pairing it with existing Ellis laws about the 5-year versus 10-year, or 5 and 10-year cutoff point, and then the third issue being on the what other exemptions and comparing it to other cities. That way we could discuss it more fully, staff could offer their opinions, and we could take action if necessary at that point.
Yeah, I'm happy to support that. I think we also have to talk to our city council members. I mean, some of them have been here since the inception of the city of West Hollywood, and I think that we do see some differences in between our ordinance and the Los Angeles ordinance, and also differences in our ordinance between the Ellis Act and the owner-occupied evictions. And I think maybe they could shed some light on why those differences exist. I certainly will email and set up a meeting with John Duran and just see if he has any light to shed on that. And obviously, John Heilman and John D'Amico have been here for a long time, and maybe this has come up before, and maybe there's something there and a reason for these differences. So just doing some independent research, I think, could help us bolster that discussion on the future agenda.
Well, we have a motion, so I think we were supposed to
second.
second it before we had a discussion.
Yeah, I'm happy to second it.
All right, I would like to add this to the discussion then.
Okay.
I think this is a topic that we could examine more fully and clearly at a study session than to do it here. And when is our next study session, may I ask?
Study session typically occurs in July.
Right,
And we can't take action at a study session.
right, but we
What
could,
would the benefit be to having the study session rather than in public, with the public present and televised?
I think I'm just trying to suggest that maybe that would be a time we could spend more time on it, but
Mr. Noonan, what do you think?
Regarding,
I just thought maybe you might have had a comment on this discussion, and maybe you had some
I
direction for us.
did. I wanted the commission to just be aware that this is a very strong protection and deterrent from owners removing tenants and circumventing Ellis. that owners always have the opportunity to use the Ellis Act, and on a 2-unit building, that is available to that owner. However, the owner occupancy protections that we have in place are in place and by design to provide very strong protections and a very strong deterrent from circumventing the law.
Thank you.
So I think that's why at a study session, we might,
So, Mr. Noonan, you didn't have a comment either way, whether it would be better as an agendized item at a regular commission meeting or the study session?
Oh, I apologize. I didn't think that that's my role. That's ultimately your decision as the commission.
What do you think?
If I may, Chair, I just, whatever we do, I don't want to really weaken the RSO the way it was written. It worked for all these years, and you know, it demonstrated how important these protections that we have, and now if we're gonna start, you know, pulling things out of this ordinance just because there was one specific scenario or case, but the whole protections that apply to the tenants, that's why we, you know, we have this RSO in West Hollywood. For so many years, we really want to provide those protections to the tenants. And
I want to make a point of order. So there's a motion on the table to agendize this, very specific to these 3 issues. I think we're getting
an open
more on the
session.
issue rather than whether to agendize it or not. That's really the question. Do we agendize it and discuss it, maybe take action, or do we not?
well, there's been a
the
second.
details we can discuss later.
There's been a second, and now we're having the discussion.
We're having a discussion
But
on.
do you
My
want to
point of
call for the
order
vote?
is that the discussion should be on whether we should agendize this for a later discussion or not the pros and cons about the elements of what I'm talking about.
All right.
And just to clarify, your motion is to have it in an open session?
Yes,
not a study session. Right.
specifically in the next, I think I said 4 meetings, within the next 4 meetings.
So that's the motion on the table, and let's call the vote. Secretary? Maybe call.
Commissioner Kerpes,
Aye.
Commissioner Bergstein,
Aye.
Commissioner O'Keefe, Commissioner Maggio, Commissioner Topchian,
Oh, wait, Commissioner Maggio has to vote.
No.
Commissioner Topchian,
no.
Chair Charity.
Aye. So we'll put it on a future agenda to talk about it in the open and see what we think about it. And I would encourage us all to do our independent research, or if you have any documents or anything you want to bring to it, you know, we don't have to burden staff so much with this. We can do our individual meetings and see what we can figure out to bring to this discussion. I think it's fairly simple, I feel.
I could request that perhaps at that meeting, if we have copies of how other municipalities handle this, whether it be Los Angeles or maybe you know, San Francisco, Berkeley, Santa Monica, just a copy of their ordinance on the same type of issue.
Well, I think that settles the new business. Do we have any further comment or questions or concerns about that item? No. Okay. We can move on from item 10 to item 11, public comment. Do we have any public comment? No. So item 10 to item 11 to item 12, commission comments. Any commission comments?
Hi.
I just wanted to, Mr. Noonan, really compliment your staff. I don't know who all was involved in the rent stabilization news, but as in the last issue, you really chose topics that are extremely timely, really in the public's, you know, I've been hearing questions on whether it was about, you know, legality of smoking, marijuana, cost sharing, but just really a timely, informative newsletter. So please pass along my thanks to your staff for producing this fine publication. Thank you.
Commissioner Maggio?
Yes, I echo your comments, Rob, especially on what cannabis legislation means to a landlord and tenant. There's many paragraphs here, and it's maybe something we would like to have again for an open and further discussion. I was also impressed with the fact they've talked about the electrical vehicle charging stations, which briefly says that in 2017, the rent stabilization ordinance was amended, giving tenants the right to install an electric vehicle charging station at a rent-stabilized property. And also, I think, emphasizing the short-term rentals, which are not legal in West Hollywood, and the new ordinance, the City of West Hollywood prohibiting short tenant rentals. The City Council adopted ordinance number 15-958, clarifying the prohibition on renting an apartment of any part or an apartment for a period of 30 days or less. And there's much more to that as well, but that's just kind of the outline that I wanted to bring to everyone's attention. And again, in the buyout agreement, there is a whole page that really talks about the tenants' rights, from the fact that they could cancel a buyout within the 30-day period. They have a right to have an attorney, and I think that's all I would cover at this time, but I think these are topics we might want to bring back and for the public. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Any further commission comments?
Yeah, I just wanted to echo what was said about the rent stabilization newsletter for both the tenants and the landlords. Excellent. I learned a lot actually reading it. I thought I knew all the answers, and I learned new things. I think I may have mentioned it, but if not, I just wanted to bring up that the county is proposing, I think they may have already actually approved it, the source of income discrimination prohibition, so that Section 8 tenants with vouchers can't be discriminated against and disallowed from renting a unit just because of their source of income. I'm hoping that the city might be able to look into that as well someday. And the other thing I was going to mention, is I had the opportunity to participate last night in the homeless count. I was counting over in Beverly Hills. I'll be counting over in Hollywood later tonight. But I wanted to give a shout out to all the volunteers that are probably assembling right now over at the sheriff's station here in West Hollywood who are participating in tonight's count here in West Hollywood. This is a count that's done countywide to get an accurate count of the homeless people that are in our community, and it also so that we can judge or determine based upon the numbers if we're improving that situation or not each year, and also it establishes the dissemination of resources as well for various services throughout the community and the county. So
How do you get a count, and how do you know if they live in Beverly Hills or West Hollywood?
you're assigned a
crossover?
very specific, I'm going to say precinct or like a neighborhood, and you're in groups, so the entire city is covered and counted all at the same time. And so you go out to your areas and you count, or you go up and down your streets and you count the individuals that you may or may not see. Last night, we only saw one individual in the area that we were at. Many of the sections didn't find anybody at all. Other sections found, 6, 7, 8 people. And then those numbers are all turned into the county and added up and through a formula. And
So it's kind of an estimate because you can't really be accurate, right?
it's what you see. It's there are other in the formula, just like with the census and all of that. There's a formula that they use to cover the undercount and try their best to get an accurate count. But they need people out there to actually see people and count them, and then.
Do we have a West Hollywood count thus far, or?
Well, we have the numbers from previous years, and then tonight they're counting for this year's count.
And do you know what last year's number was? I'm just curious.
I don't recall. It had gone.
150?
We had gone. Oh, it was like no, I don't think it was 150. It was lower than that, but I can't remember the number.
All right.
The county had gone down. The city had gone up slightly, I believe. I'm supposed to tell about the housing meeting too, but I think Peter is better at that because I don't remember. It's on the 29th at 6:30. I'll let you do that. That was in his comments.
Very good. Any further commission comments? Okay, so then we'll move on from item 11 to item 12, staff comments.
Thank you. So yes, following up on what Commissioner Kerpes has alluded to, on the 29th, we are hosting our second annual conversation on housing, and this will be at Plummer Park at 7 o'clock, rooms 5 and 6. This is an opportunity to come here and learn about the housing programs that the city is working on and the endeavors that we are taking on in the near future. It's also an opportunity to share your thoughts on housing and your ideas and suggestions. So it's free and welcome to all. And again, it is on this coming Tuesday, the 29th, at Plummer Park at 7 o'clock in rooms 5 and 6.
And would you like the commission to come to help in any way, or just basically to be present?
You would, if the commission came, it would be to be present. You're certainly more than welcome to attend. This is a housing item and a housing meeting. So, and we do touch on rent stabilization, certainly, because it is such a wonderful program for housing, but it's really more of a focus on how we're meeting goals of producing new affordable housing, both through mixed income buildings in the inclusionary program and through our fees that we collect off of properties in lieu fees and commercial impact fees, and the partnerships that we build with nonprofits to produce additional new units.
So it's like a workshop that we will have, in a sense.
A listening session, if you will. Really, I do have a presentation, and then we do have some testimony from someone who is living in one of our units that's been produced. And then we just turn it over to the floor to hear what people have, their thoughts and their feelings on housing and how it's working out for them, their perceptions, what we could do better, what we're doing well at. So we like to do this to be out in the community at least once a year. We do 2 meetings. Last night we just did one here on the west side at the library community room. And we also do this at this time of the year because we're doing it in preparation for the annual report that we send up to the state on our meeting our goals in the housing element.
Did we have a good attendance the last meeting?
I think that we had a nice attendance. It wasn't an overly packed room, but it was an engaged audience, and I think that folks learned something and contributed something as well.
Thank you.
So, can I, just a question about that meeting. There would be some real discussion about the preservation of the current rent stabilized units, right? There would no discussion about that? Because that's I think we are in West Hollywood, and as a rent stabilized commissioner, I think that should be the main interest for us. So at least for me.
So my division covers both housing programs and rent stabilization as a program. And so these meetings are really within the camp of housing and not in the camp of rent stabilization, and they are focused on housing.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions for staff? Well, with that, we'll move on to adjournment. Item 14. The next regular meeting of the Rent Stabilization Commission will be held on February 28th in the West Hollywood Park Public Meeting Room, the council chambers. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.